Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. We are going to talk about digital influencer marketing. Let me introduce our two speakers. First is Dan Benyamin. He is the founder and CEO of CitizenNet. He has a Bachelor of Science and an MS degree in electrical engineering from UCLA. He was previously co-founder and CEO of Fat Noise, where he directed the company's core technology design and development initiatives. In 2009, Dan launched CitizenNet and is currently CEO. And we have Josh Kaplan. And I will say that it's a pleasure to be here with Josh because Josh, once upon a time, worked at Variety.
Did.
Josh is the director of United Entertainment Group's newly minted Properties and Ventures practice. And in that role, Josh identifies and scales emerging products and technologies through the lens of digital marketing and media expertise. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dave.
So I want to start out with something for both of you to answer. You know, digital influencer marketing is a familiar concept in some ways. It's a new concept in others, especially for those of us my age who are not millennials and were not raised in an internet world. What do you feel is the biggest opportunity and the biggest pitfall facing brands that want to get into digital influencer marketing? So let's start with Josh on that.
Sure. Well, influencer marketing is nothing new, right? I think, you look at even Michael Jordan back in the day. It was about creating this authentic connection with public figures, with thought leaders, with people who were truly influential. And so now, what's happened is with this proliferation of social media, there are many other influencers. There's a soapbox for everyone. And so I'd say the pitfalls are really that we're at this inflection point from a marketer's perspective, that we've seen a lot of really great integrations with brands. We've seen some not so much. And so, the pitfalls are in that there's a little bit of a lack of transparency. There's a lack of accountability of, what each party would receive and is responsible for. There's a lack of uniformity. Every deal is different. And I think the opportunities are being able to take those obstacles and solve them with a combination of the technology we have available, but also with some of the same strategies that we've been using over the years when we didn't have access to technology.
Dan?
Yeah, I mean, I'd echo a lot of it. I'd say that the opportunity is that I really feel that it has the capability of being the future of marketing. I sort of echoing what was in the Crackle keynote earlier. It is potentially one of the best ways of delivering a brand message in a very natural fashion. And when you sort of do the devil's work as I do in placing ads in your newsfeed, these tend to be some of the best ones. The downside, though, is that it's not measured as such. It's sort of experimental budgets. It's not necessarily measured and held to the same standards as the rest of the media budgets. And I think that's something that we jointly wanted to solve.
Definitely.
Well, let's get into that then really quickly. How do you measure the success and the effectiveness of a digital influencer campaign?
Sure.
For us, I think as far as measurement and specifically how we look at this, it really comes down to a holistic approach, right? We're looking at it with the same rigor that we do in paid media, and I'm sure Dan can speak to that, but measuring emotion or an emotional response has always been a very difficult thing for marketers, right? And so there's certain ways that we can try to mechanize it. For example, engagement. Engagement's a pretty easy level of understanding whether someone's truly seen the content. You start there. From there, you can really start to develop a customer journey. Being able to see not only have they watched a video or looked at a photo, but what happens next? What is that next action? And so we're starting to now measure influence not just in reach, but really in what that customer journey has become.
Yeah, and I'd say also from my standpoint, again, we see it very much as media, and when it's treated as such, it can be pixeled, it can be tagged, it can be traced with 1-day, 7-day, 28-day attribution windows, click, view through all the sort of ad tech stuff that you would do, and even now rolling out programmatic brand recall and brand lift studies that are part of it. So you will absolutely know when it's sort of instrumented properly if it is working.
You know, I got to say, I'm in my 50s. I know that people around my age have to be looking at this to some degree. And I mean, we're online, but we're not online consuming the same things that our children are consuming. So I look at this and kind of go, who are these people?
Right.
And so if you're trying to match up your brand
Right.
with a digital influencer, with a YouTube star, whatever it is, how do you even evaluate who's right for your brand?
Right.
And how do you make that match?
Yeah, so a big part of what we've worked on is we've pulled together some of the work that we've done in the past in the keyword space. So we have about 650 million social accounts, probably 5 billion some odd data points, and we've done a big analysis around keywords, making predictions around keywords. So we extended that same technology to influencers. So we did an analysis of about 10,000 posts from influencers attached to brands and what works and what doesn't work. So we use that information to build statistical models so that we can make those predictions. And what's fascinating to me in some of the handouts that I think are out there on the little black cover, I don't know any of these people either, right? But
Nor do I.
Right, but it's not. I'd say, you know, so who are we, right? So you look at it, and there's a woman there who I think is like Cupcakes and Cardio or something was the first one, and she has 2.5 million followers on Facebook. And she talks about cooking. It's not necessarily even a kid thing. So, but she obviously does a very good job of it, and she's exactly the person that if I was a food brand, for example, that I'd want to be talking, about my product.
And that's a great point. That to your point about that, there's, maybe you can essentially age out of this concept of influencers, but there really isn't any difference between, I'd be hard pressed to find anyone in this room that doesn't at least access a smartphone and consume, whether it's social media or social news, right? So there are influential individuals, influential media organizations, influential causes that are still out there and communicating with and creating a dialogue with their consumers. And so it's more about discovering who those people are and where they're influential and in what platforms and what channels.
This is the thing. I can see where if you've got someone who's a big food YouTuber, that's great if you've got a food brand.
Right.
As it happens, I do have a favorite YouTuber. I have Natalie Tran from Community Channel out of Australia, who I think is hilarious. Okay. But if you take someone like that who basically is doing sort of sketch comedy, something that's between sketch comedy and stand-up, is there a way to match up someone like that with a brand, and how would you think about that?
Absolutely. I mean, it comes down to art and science, right? So in the same way that, again, for some reason I have Michael Jordan on the brain, but you'd be able to trust Michael Jordan in what he's wearing when he plays basketball or what he's wearing when he works out. But if I were a food brand, I wouldn't necessarily think he'd be the best fit or to bring this back to this era, LeBron James. It comes down to this concept of relative influence, right? How can someone be influential not just to a particular audience, but for a particular reason, right? For a particular brand or product or a cause. And so we've spent a lot of time mechanizing this concept of relative trust. We've broken it down essentially into 4 main factors. Comes down to reach, right, which is a pretty simple measurement tool, and that's something that's fairly objective. And then relevance, right? I'll let you speak a little bit about that, but reach, relevance, authority, and accessibility. And so accessibility being the intangibles that connect you as David with this food blogger, right? The creative alignment, that human element that effectively delivers that creative storytelling. And I'd say when you combine all of them together, that's what gives you a holistic choice.
So on our point, the software is trying to do matching between audiences. So given a brand this is the sort of relative rank of these different influencers. It's doing matching between content, so it uses natural language processing to match content. But the software only goes so far, which is why part of the score ultimately is what we've partnered with UEG on to have the human take on it as well. So it's really combining all data points possible.
What is the biggest difference between working with digital influencers and traditional celebrity marketing campaigns?
You'd be surprised to find that there's not a lot of difference in many of these deals. We take the same strategic insights that we've applied in the talent space, and we apply them to influencers in a way where it still creates that same authenticity. And I think that's really what it comes down to. It's about, rather than, many people speak about automation, right? And whether or not technology will ever allow us to be fully automated. For us, it's more about amplification. It's about taking the same strategies that we've been using and the same thought process around who is truly influential and applying that at scale.
Yeah. I think the other difference is that these are, in a certain way, they've homegrown their own fan bases. So they weren't necessarily put in front of a camera and exposed via broadcast or theatrical, but they sort of brick by brick built up their fan bases to the sizes they are. And that's actually the sort of proof point that they are a person that's worth listening to in a certain topic, that they built that themselves.
I know you have some slides that you want to show. Before we get to those, I have one question that I think is really important.
Sure.
What do you feel is the biggest thing you see brands and companies doing wrong when they try to get into this space?
I would say the biggest thing that brands are doing wrong is really treating this as an experiment. And I think we've seen it in the same way, the same trajectory of paid media and how it's evolved, and the same trajectory of native advertising. And you know better than anyone, right? That anytime you enter a new forum or a new channel, it's very easy to just say, all right, we'll just allocate a certain amount of budget to this and kind of see where it goes. And I think the biggest thing, the biggest fallacy is that that's enough. So you do, just because there are low barriers to entry doesn't mean that you can just treat it as something as unimportant as an extra billboard or an extra piece of content. And so I think giving it that same rigor will help solve that problem.
So you have a deck you wanted to show?
Yeah.
So we'll have you walk us through that, and we'll see how much time we have after.
All right. There's about 25 different versions of these reports. We've customized them to 25 different companies in attendance here. If you don't have one customized to you, then let us know. But essentially all it boils down to is maybe hard to read, but all we put in is BuzzFeed food. That's it. And the software does the rest of the matching. There's no filtering or any other sort of work. Of course, you can sort of steer it in one way or another, but all we're saying is this is our brand, or this is our objective, or maybe this is a competitive brand that we're trying to go after. The result is a long list of people, and they're measured in all sorts of different ways. So here we have an example. Just a Taste has a 40% overlap with BuzzFeed Food. So there's a 40% sharing of audience between the two of them, which is a pretty natural fit. But of course, what you have in the report is a summary of really the kind of top two. This is a visualization of that score. And essentially what you have on the far left is a CitizenNet score. And then you have these three kind of star ratings. The star ratings is what comes in from the UEG team. When the UEG team rates the influencer, that's how you get the final FIQ score on the far right. So that's really the combination of what the machine is doing and then the human take as well. And then lastly, you get, this is just example data, but you get a media plan that shows how much each influencer costs and how much to bill against them. And then our software will then programmatically take the influencer's post, expose it to their audience, as well as a much larger audience that is predicted to do well. And you have example media plans at the end of that report. And generally, you're going to be getting way more video views or traffic at a much lower cost per. And yeah, that's it on the slides.
All right, I think we got about 1 minute if you want to tell that story.
Would you like that?
Sure. So an example of a bad example, and this is just sort of demonstrates when someone kind of throws a campaign over the wall. And I'm the one saying this because I guess I can't get in trouble. I'm on the technology side, is that why? So, but basically, Scott Disick posted something on Instagram, which literally the Instagram post was, "Hey, Scott, please post this on Wednesday, July 18th with the following hashtag." And obviously you lose all legitimacy when you do that. So if you're gonna, if that's your relationship with the talent, with the influencer, then don't be surprised that that's what you get. So I think even with all the software, we want to make sure that the relationships are genuine, or else you may trip over that.
Absolutely. I mean, it's really just taking that same rigor of the predictive science that they have, and it's being able to now translate that with a human element. And it gives us the context that we need to make these decisions, but more importantly, it preserves the authenticity of the campaign and the content.
Okay, guys, thank you so much for doing this today. We really appreciate having you here.
That was great.